Well, hello everyone. This is Daniel here at the SOLA network, and we are going through a series called The Chinese Diaspora. And I'm here to introduce you to Tommy and Caleb. I'm going to have you introduce yourselves in a bit, but today we'll be talking about Ireland and and people who are of Chinese background who are in Ireland. What is the church doing? How can we pray, and so on. So why don't you two introduce yourselves? Why don't you start with Tommy?
Okay, thank you, Daniel, for having us. My name is Tommy Kyaw Tun. I'm actually originally from Burma. I was born in Burma, grew up in Hong Kong, and I came to Ireland to study medicine. And I finished, and I stayed, became a Christian, and I've stayed and worked ever since. I'm an elder in my church, the Chinese Gospel Church in Ireland, and I also work full time as a doctor as well. So my ministries include preaching, overseeing the English ministry in Esker House in one of the suburbs, and also looking after the young people.
Caleb?
Yeah. Hi, I'm Caleb Theo. I am actually an Irish born Chinese. My parents came to Ireland in the 70s. They studied here. My mum is from Hong Kong. My dad is from Malaysia. Uh, yes, I was raised in Ireland, raised in the church from a very young age. My parents were heavily involved in church my whole life. Uh, so I was raised in church, uh, grew up here, went through the Irish school system here. I am now a software engineer, full time, and been working about 3 years. And in CGCI in Ireland, I would be the youth leader, leading the youth, so a group of teenagers between 12 and 18. I will also have a team as well, working with a team who are about two other main leaders and five other kind of new being in trained leaders right now as well. Um,
Tommy, you mentioned what brought you to Ireland. Caleb, you also mentioned a little bit about how your parents uh, were moved to Ireland. Can you share with us, how did Chinese people end up in Ireland in the first place? I think that would be a question that many of us would be curious about.
I suppose we're like many immigrants and looking for a better life for themselves or for their next generation. I suspect mostly for the next generation. And perhaps you can broadly say at the early years, 1960s, 70s, two broad categories. Many of them would be, in the restaurant catering based
Mm.
business, Chinese takeaways, some restaurants. But there'll be quite a few number of students as well from the 70s and so on, different disciplines, whether it's medicine, computing, or others as well. So two kind of broad categories from pretty much the early outset, I'd say.
So two categories would be people who come looking for work, and many of them you said you start small businesses. You mentioned Chinese takeaways. We call those Chinese takeouts in the US. And then
Yes.
you also mentioned foreign students, like
Yeah,
you.
students as well. Yeah, like myself. Yeah.
Caleb, what brought your family to Ireland?
yeah, good question. So very similar to what Tommy's already said, my grandfather on my mum's side from Hong Kong, he was a good businessman. He had like kind of a restaurants in Hong Kong, and he wanted to set up a restaurant in Ireland. I think there's a lot of people going from Hong Kong to the UK to set up takeout or takeaways, same as well. Then I think he saw an opportunity to come to Ireland, so he came to Ireland and set up a restaurant here. I think that's then how my mum would have came as well. So she would be about, I think she came over when she was about 15. She came over to study. Um, uh, so that's how she ended up uh, in Ireland, is essentially through that takeaway business for my granddad. My dad's slightly different. He kind of came a little later, and he actually originally studied in England for his first 3 years of secondary school. And then for his college, he actually came to Ireland to do his master's. And so that's how he came to Ireland.
What are what are what are the churches kind of doing in terms of reaching Chinese in Ireland? You can share about your church, or you can share about what's been going on more broadly.
Yeah, I suppose just before we get to that specific question, in the recent times between, immigration and demographics changes, there's a lot of prediction that, say for example, like people from Hong Kong would decline, the Cantonese congregation and so on. But of course, with a lot of the recent developments in Hong Kong and China, so many of them have landed here. So just wanted to say that, really can't see too far in the distant future as to what God would do to any, whether it's population, the landscape, and then for our churches. So whereas we thought that we would be driving and more and more developing the Mandarin and English ministries, and that's the Cantonese side getting older and so on, and less people to reach out. Those who have been shared with in terms of the gospel or reached out, visited, etc., have all been done and cleared. But actually now there's so many more who are just coming to the church. We don't even have to go to them. They're just coming to church, whether it's to seek God or other practical help and advice. I think there's a mix of both. Um, Apart from that, then locally, I mean, Ireland is a small country, so you can get from one side to the other pretty much in 2 hours, 3 hours. Some of the more remote places, 4, 5, 6 hours. But the bulk of the cities are reached within 2 hours, say. So to visit them and then the towns in between, you can do that in day trips. So once a year, for example, we'll have like kind of like visiting different parts of Ireland mission, like local short-term mission. Apart from that, then the bulk of it, especially on the Chinese side, would be based on like festive events,
Mm.
whether it's Mid Autumn Festival, Dragon Boat Festival, Chinese New Year, Christmas, of course, and so on, etc. In the English side, we do outreach a little bit differently. It's probably more one-on-one, testimony sharing, visiting. We've tried a few big events, parties, and picnics and barbecues. Hit and miss, variable response. Either way, I think we need to have one-to-one connections or small groups and so on for doing that.
Yeah, I think to add to that as well, I think our Tommy's already kind of said it there. We've done a few things here and there, but it's definitely because from my perspective, as being an Irish-born Chinese, being this like second generation, and among my peers, like Tommy said already, Ireland is quite small, so there is already a lot of connection. Like those who are second generations, they would know each other, or you would know someone who knows someone, and you'd be able to find those connections quite quickly. So it really is, yeah, what Tommy said, like really more smaller groups, not necessarily bigger events to reach out, but those friendships or connections that you have. One thing as well, I think on the English side, we do a bit, or we've been doing quite a bit for a number of few years. Is like kind of summer camps for kids, and we do kind of support the kids ministry in in those parts, and in either running Sunday school or sometimes like kids outreach programs and kind of kids summer camps. So they'll be kind of the things that I guess we have for our English congregation responded well to, and have kind of both found a purpose in it, and there's some good response out of it as well.
As you are ministering and being involved in the church scene, I know that you've gotten involved in some of the things in the UK as well, and you've gotten to know some of the church leaders there. What are some things that are you find that are similar, but maybe some things that might be unique for Chinese in Ireland?
Caleb, you want to take that first?
Trying to gather my thoughts here. For between Ireland and UK, for at least the Irish-born Chinese, British-born Chinese, we have definitely felt that there's like a lot of similarities. I think that's why we've connected so much with them. over the years. I had so many good friends over there, who I can just connect to and chat with, and really have fellowship with. Um, because I guess there is not too much of a cultural difference between Ireland and England. There's a bit different like school system and different subjects and the parts of that. But I guess the identity part of being raised Chinese but in a Western culture, that's like that main connection. And so there's that similarity and that kind of connection there. Um, I can't really think of anything that's too different. The only real big thing is I think when Tommy mentioned it already um with the Hong Kong families coming to Ireland, UK, and how Ireland is smaller, so we don't have as big of a scale or a complete change in landscape of people arriving. Yeah, but we would that's just more of a scale difference, not necessarily a difference.
Yeah, and a few other differences, and it's probably actually more so to do with just bog standard factors like geography and so on. So again, size and differences. So like our church is probably one of the main churches, Chinese churches or Chinese heritage churches in Ireland. There are a few other smaller churches slash gatherings, house gatherings, and so on. Some registered, not some not. Um, but in UK, for example, in the large cities, you'll have one or maybe more in each center or each large city. And when a student goes from say secondary school, high school to university, they very often leave one city, their home church, so to speak, go to another one. And so part of the growing up is to plug themselves into another university group, another church, ministries. Whereas in our church, it tends to be like, you go straight from kids to teens, youth to university to young adults, all in the same church. Pros and cons. um, so in terms of second generation growing up Irish born Chinese, or at least Irish bred Chinese, that is definitely a very different experience from say in the UK.
Hmm. You briefly mentioned the influx of Hong Kongers who are coming uh, to the islands here, um, and that's kind of shifted some of the ministry approaches. But what would you say are some of the needs of Irish Chinese right now, and how the church is meeting that?
Irish Chinese Christians or Irish Chinese?
You can go either way with
Um,
that.
yeah. Oh, I suppose, I suppose very generically. I mean, I mentioned briefly that people might be coming to church for different reasons. So, and I think, in fact, perhaps in the States, I suspect it's more developed than here. Here, there'll be some about like accommodation finding cars, schools, the usual, etc. But we might not have as much opportunities for say full-fledged old age ministry daycare centers, some which I know is very well developed, especially maybe in certain parts of Chinatowns and so on. And if Chinese heritage churches are in are already there many for a long time in Chinatowns. um, so apart from that, pretty generic. I mean, some specific ones that I've come across recently, for example, like the teenagers or the youth of the families who came, they're between language or feeling that whether they fit in or don't fit in, may or may not be able to intermingle with the youth groups, those who are already in the youth group here. um, from I think we have less of an issue in terms of integration between say the Cantonese and Mandarin, maybe some, but not so much. I hear sometimes in UK that's been, you have to set up a complete different ministry for them. But so far I don't think we're not quite there yet. I mean, there's a little bit of emphasis on like maybe doing a separate group for them, but it's not fully trashed out just yet.
So what do you have now, and what would you say might need to be developed? Can you?
um I suppose of course we still we'll strive on integrating and helping people to settle in um, across the generations and across the languages. So whether it's the parents who are coming as first generation, their children who are coming as not quite even one and a half, but some of them are younger, some are older, some could be older as ready to go to university already. Um, so finding friendships, finding groups that they can feel that they can belong to, maybe even areas of ministry they can serve. None of that should be taken for granted. And I suppose the hazard or the danger is people can come in and be doing things, but do the people actually get to know each other relationally and
Mm.
so on? I certainly am one who thinks that apart from doing and serving together, etc., people need to invest in time just getting to know each other. I think that's really important, because otherwise it's easy as people get busy and so on, etc., and they don't know each other, misunderstandings turns into conflicts and so on and so forth. So basically integrated harmoniously relationally, I think would be a key priority, I would think.
Mm.
Yeah, I agree with what Tom is saying there. I just try to take up some examples of like people who are coming in, and it's like it is definitely a challenge in terms of integration, and it's like you can see from the youth perspective, some of the, of course, teenagers are teenagers, sometimes they're a bit socially awkward or need a bit of an encouragement to reach out, but you can see those who come in who's a bit more shy. You need to definitely spend time with them, get to know them, help them integrate. You know, like the community is a huge part of that. The fact that if the family, if the parents connect with the other parents, if the parents connect with the church, and then the kids and then connect with the other teenagers, it works well. And even there's some cases where there's teenagers who recently come over. Their parents aren't here. Their parents are still in Hong Kong. They're here to
Mm.
study, but there is this lovely lady who brings them out on the Sundays and really encourages them, pretty much like a mum, even though she's not the mum. And she's wonderful for that, and she's investing time in that, and that's really supportive for me as a youth leader. Then to know that she is committed to bringing the youth out, to then we can then get to know them. I know there's still a lot of work to do there, because maybe they aren't that feel welcome, or maybe they need to settle in and feel like they belong. But at least if they're out, we can have the time with them to get to know them, and they're good guys. So it is the idea of that, and committing to a relational at the time to help people integrate. Yeah, 100%.
You mentioned integration, and you mentioned some growing ministries. What are some other ways we can be praying for your church, the ministries, and the Chinese in Ireland?
Yeah, so I think not unique to our church. Our church needs a lot of prayer with regards to for the leadership. You know, for between like the different generations. So what I call G1 versus G2, or I have another label called G2O. So these are people who are actually more, they're coming in and actually they're first generation in the sense that yeah, they are the first ones here, but they've come in a later stage and in many ways culturally very much more like G2, like people like Caleb, in terms of thinking, openness to change, and so on, etc. They're fluent in English, even though they may be coming from China and so on. I mean, I did my own thesis on pan-generational leadership, dissertation, and interviewed various leaders and members in my church. And I think it's a critical thing to be able to try to develop a healthy kind of pan-generational leadership for across the generations, across the different congregations in a Chinese heritage like ours. Like we're up to about 500 people and 20 something odd leaders in terms of like deacons, pastors, elders. So again, unity, respecting, learning to know how to work with each other and so on, etc. is so important because it's such an impact on then across all the generations, not just for second generation English ministry that we're involved in, but I think it has a lot of impact as well on the Chinese congregation. Very often they may feel like we're not we're getting further and further away from them, but that's not the intention, right?
Mm,
So
mm.
I think these are things which are not unique to our church. And then wisdom in doctrine, preaching, faithful preaching, and so on. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that to add to that is just as like for the leadership, and praying for our leaders is that idea of, yeah, I think unity. When I think of unity, I think of the idea that you have to work together and communicate. But of course, in communication, there could be miscommunication, and I think a lot of what I feel that is needed more is forgiveness and grace to each other, and this idea of from being a point of humility to be able to help, to want to understand each other, to take the time to understand each other. And sometimes I think, as sometimes church life is busy, or even life is busy, you kind of don't prioritize the time, and you kind of get on. But I think that does more harm than good. So I think, yeah, for grace and forgiveness and for time and understanding each other really is, I think would be, yeah, I know God will be able to bless us in growing in that.
Yeah, it's encouraging to hear that there are efforts being made to reach and disciple others. I also echo some of the same prayer requests that you have. And it just seems to be some of those are very common concerns that we hear at churches in general. And so, but thank you for the work that you do. I'm encouraged by your desire and the ministries that you have through your church there in Dublin, right?
Yes, in Dublin.
Well, thanks a lot, Tommy and Caleb, for your time. And this was a blessed interview, and I appreciate being able to chat with you. All right.
Thank you,
All right.
David.
Take care, everybody.
Cool. Thank you for having us.
Thank you very much.